I remember my initial awareness that everything I thought I knew was really holding me captive. It was a rainy Hong Kong afternoon. I was training with my master, pushing myself beyond limits that I thought were fixed and unyielding. Muscles seared, sweat dripped on the wooden floor, and frustration mounted with each unsuccessful attempt at a skill that I had practiced 10,000 times. Again, my master would instruct me, unmoved by my clear exhaustion. I copied the motion, technical and precise, as I had been taught, but something was missing. No, he instructed me, the tone of his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You are tied to your training. Those words cut deeper than any physical attack I ever endured. In that moment, I discovered the greatest truth about mastery. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to your progress isn't what you don't know. It's what you think you already know. That day totally changed everything for me. And today, I'm going to share this truth with you. A truth that isn't just specific to martial arts, but every aspect of your life. The truth that in order to actually move on, you must unlearn what you have learned. But caution is advised. This journey is not simple. The mind grasps desperately to its certainties. It prefers the safety of familiar limitations over the paralyzing liberty of unlimited possibility. Are you ready to let go of all that you believe makes you you? Will you empty your cup to the absolute bottom if it will force you to appear bare naked in front of your own truth? Listen well, because what I'm going to share with you is not philosophy. It's an operating path of liberation from your own constructed prison of thought. The world's most destructive illusion is believing you know something. Knowledge becomes a prison whenever you identify yourself with it. I see it everywhere. People so rooted in being right that they've forgotten how to grow. You've been there yourself, haven't you? That moment when standing up for what you do is more important than learning what you don't. The accountant who can't into calming an artist. The businessman who can't picture learning to dance. The fighter so dedicated to his craft that he becomes predictable, mechanical, beaten before entering the ring. These are not merely professional flaws, spiritual ones. Your mind has constructed walls and labeled them wisdom. But what if they're really walls blocking you from your potential? Let me tell you about a student who approached me years ago. He was already a master in his craft, trophies adorning his walls, respect wherever he went. His technique was ideal, his discipline unrivaled. But he lacked something. In sparring, he was mechanical, predictable. I blindfolded him one day and said to him, "Fight me." Without his visual cues, his pristine technique fell apart. He lurched about wildly, desperately. When the blindfold was removed, he was dripping sweat, humiliated. You have practiced 10,000 kicks once, I told him, when you should have learned one kick 10,000 ways. His learning had become his constraint. His sureness had become his vulnerability. His mastery had become his limitation. This is the first law of unlearning, observing how mastery can become limitation. Consider it in your own life. Where have you become so confident that you've stopped questioning? Where have you uttered, "I am this," or "I cannot do that," with such absoluteness that it is now fact? These are not innocuous assumptions. They are boundaries you've set on your potential. The master is honored, revered, but occasionally mired in a moment that has passed. And while the beginner, the one who will be willing to be silly, to question, to fall, to unlearn, this one keep growing. This one will keep growing. As I have previously stated, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. The second principle of unlearning is harder. You must be willing to destroy your identity. Most people think that change is about adding something new, more knowledge, more skills, more credentials. But true change must include subtraction. You must be willing to let go of who you think you are in order to discover who you might be. This is not spiritual theory. This is practical reality. I remember when I first began developing Gugait Kundu, people condemned me for abandoning the traditional kung fu forms. They said I was betraying my heritage, my training, my identity as a Chinese martial artist. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't rejecting tradition. I was refusing to be imprisoned by it. Your identity, the story you tell about who you are, is both your greatest strength and greatest limitation. It gives you safety, but takes away freedom. Safety, but not growth. Think how often you say, I'm not the kind of person who, or I could never. These aren't facts, they're bars on the door of a cell. And you've not only built this cell, you've convinced yourself that it's a home. You've decorated it with accomplishments and walled it certainty. But a well-decorated prison is still a prison. And the tragedy is that you hold the key. You've had it all along. The question is whether you have the courage to use it. I want you to think about something that defines you. Maybe it's your profession, doctor, teacher, engineer. Maybe it's a profession, mother, husband, breadwinner. Maybe it's a talent or skill that has become so associated with your name. Now imagine completely letting go of that identity, not tweaking it, not building on it, releasing it entirely. Feel the fear that arises. That spinning of not knowing who you would be without it. That fear is not weak. She is a signpost. She points directly to where your unlearning must begin. Because anything you can't live without is in charge of you, and anything in charge of you limits what you can become. The third rule of unlearning is the hardest one. You must embrace the emptiness that comes from releasing. Most people can't stand emptiness. They'll rush to fill any emptiness with new certainties, new selves, new limitations disguised as expansion. But true change comes from existing in the uncomfortable in-between space of who you were and who you will be. When I walked away from traditional martial arts, I didn't immediately begin designing Gate Kyundu. There was a period of genuine emptiness, painful, confusing, but necessary. Necessary. From that emptiness, anything could happen. Far too often we rush through this significant phase, capturing the initial new identity that provides relief from ignorance. I want to tell you something about water, my friend. Water doesn't try to be something. It just is. It just is. When placed into a cup, it is the cup. When placed into a teapot, it is the teapot. Water may run, or it may crash. It may feed life or erode rock. Not because it works towards these abilities, but because it has no rigid shape to preserve. No self to guard, no awareness that restricts what it can become in any particular moment. This is the kind of existence I'm calling you toward, not adding to who you already are, new information, skills, but dismantling the barriers that define that self so completely that you can do whatever the situation requires. I remember when I came to America for the first time. Everyone wanted to box me. Hollywood saw an Asian male and tried to limit what I could perform. The conventional martial artists called me a heretic for questioning their revered forms. Americans saw me as foreign, Chinese saw me as too American. Both descriptions were attempts to place me, to make me understandable, predictable, containable, and I refused them all. Not because I am a rebel, but because I have a deep sense of knowing that if I accept any definition, I must accept its limitation. This is not arrogance. It's discernment. The second you decide your definition, you establish the boundaries of what you can be. They challenge a few assumptions, disturb some areas of their identity, experience some emptiness. And then they make a deadly error, become solidified again. They trade one rigid identity for another. The corporate leader becomes the rigorous spiritual seeker. The traditional creative becomes the contrarian avant-garde rebel. The conventional intellectual becomes the trusty contrarian. They didn't really unlearn, they relearned. Undercover, genuine unlearning is not a destination. It's a continuous process. The moment you utter "now I understand" is when you must query once more. I caught myself in this too. Having broken away from orthodox martial arts, I began to systematize Jeet Kune Do for students poured in from around the world to study my approach. Books came out, schools were opened, and one morning I awoke with a shock of awareness that I was establishing exactly what I had attempted to break free of: another system, another orthodoxy, another limitation. I once notoriously taught my students: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. But the deeper truth is that it is a never-ending process. The minute you stop questioning, stop discarding, stop adjusting, that's when growth ceases. Unlearning isn't something you do one time and you're done with. It's a way of being in continuing relationship with your own knowledge. I'll tell you about Mu in Zen training. A Zen master does not reply with a yes or no when asked a question grounded in wrong assumptions. Rather, they reply with mu, meaning unask the question. Some things just cannot be replied to because they are generated out of fundamentally limited points of view. How can I succeed without transforming? Mu. How can I grow without hurting? M. How do I become new and stay the same? Mu. Questions that cannot be answered because they contain their own contradiction. They must be unasked, and the premises that go with them unlearned. Much of what you're seeking can't be found while you remain in your current state of perception. Some doors simply can't be opened without letting go of what you're carrying. This brings us to possibly the most difficult aspect of unlearning. You must be comfortable disappointing other people. When you begin deconstructing outdated identities and limitations, the folks around you will typically resist. Not because they want to hurt you, but because your evolution unsettles them. Your willingness to question what you've acquired unsettles them with what they've come to accept. Your willingness to look foolish challenges their commitment to following the appearance of competence. Your willingness to accept emptiness disrupts their investment in knowing. They will attempt, many times unwittingly, to bring you back to what feels safe. This is not evil. It's human. You'll have to be ready to disappoint them in order to honor your own growth. My teachers were cruel when I began to question the traditional martial arts. When I did not act stereotypical in Hollywood, many doors closed. When I taught Caucasians in America, many Chinese masters judged me. Every step meant disappointing someone I wanted to seek approval from. But this is what I discovered. The authentic self cannot emerge seeking others' approval. You cannot change and satisfy all those who have invested in your current form. This is not callousness or detachment. It is recognizing that your primary loyalty is to your own truth, rather than to other individuals' comfort with that truth. Now, I want to be clear about something. Unlearning is not a rejection of all knowledge or a denial of the necessity for training and discipline. On the contrary, true spontaneity, true freedom can only arise through rigorous practice. As I would tell my students, before I knew the art, a punch was just a punch, and a kick just a kick. Kick, just a kick. After I knew the art, a punch wasn't a punch, a kick wasn't a kick. Now that I know the art, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. This apparent paradox contains great truth. You must learn deeply in order to unlearn effectively. You must master form in order to go beyond it. The novice who avoids form does not move beyond it. They simply remain ignorant of it. Mastery and unlearning are not opposites. They are collaborators in the path to true freedom. Here is where most misunderstand my teaching. When I say empty your cup, I am not instructing you to remain empty indefinitely. I'm saying that you must empty what you think you know to make room for deeper know. When I say be like water, I am not recommending formlessness as a means of evading discipline. I am pointing to the discipline so complete that form becomes flexible, responsive, alive. The best musicians do not abandon their scales. They practice them so completely that they can transcend them into pure expression. The finest writers are... True unlearning is not ignorance. It's knowledge dissolved from rigid identity into fluid competence. Allow me to provide you with 5 practical disciplines to begin your unlearning practice today. First, the discipline of deliberate beginner's mind. Once a month, take serious time to learn something completely new, something that challenges your self-image. If you're analytical, learn to paint. If you're verbal, learn mathematics. If you're solitary, learn people skills. Don't play superficially. Go deep enough to experience actual incompetence, actual frustration, actual breakthrough. This exercise will keep your identity fluid and your learning channels open. Second, the exercise of assumption inventory. Once a week, take a fundamental assumption about yourself or about the way the world is. Write it down. Then, during the week, gather evidence counter to this belief. Not to necessarily disprove it, but to loosen its grip on your perception. You are not attempting to replace one certainty with another. You are learning to hold your assumptions lightly, to treat them as provisional tools rather than absolute truths. This practice builds the mental flexibility that is required for continuous unlearning. Third, the practice of identity rotation. In regions where there are no dire consequences, experiment with being the opposite of your normal self-image. If you are serious, experiment with being light-hearted in situations. If you are cautious, experiment with taking calculated risks. If you cherish independence, experiment with intense collaboration. Don't fake using these styles. Commit to using them fully as experiments. You'll discover that a great deal of your identity is a choice and not essential traits, yours to use or set aside as circumstances require. Fourth, the habit of comfort with criticism. Request trenchant criticism of your work, your ideas, and your approach on a regular basis, not from your most venomous critics, but from your most discerning. And when you receive this criticism, attempt to sit with it without defensiveness, without accepting or dismissing it right away. Just hold it, consider it, be willing to find truth in it without being destroyed by that truth. Most people either reject criticism entirely or gulp it down uncritically. Both responses are rooted in insecurity. The unlearner can come to criticism with neither defensiveness nor abject surrender, taking what is useful to truth and development and discarding the rest. Finally, the practice of continuous emptiness. Create space in your life for genuine not knowing. This might be meditation, time in nature, or any practice that temporarily suspends your planning, analyzing mind. This isn't escapism, it's strategic renewal of your capacity for fresh perception. Like the martial artist, who must periodically return to basic stances to maintain fundamentals, you must periodically return to emptiness to maintain your capacity for seeing beyond your accumulated knowledge. As I once said, the usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. You must empty your cup from time to time in order to maintain its usefulness. These 5 disciplines are not the entire journey, but they're a beginning. Not by doing them as techniques to be perfected, but as gates to walk through. Each one opens onto new territory of self-awareness, new horizons of who you can still become. The ultimate objective isn't to arrive at some final perfected destination. There is no destination. The objective is to develop such flexibility of identity, such comfort with uncertainty, such an ability to be empty that you can respond to the needs of the moment without the burdens of accumulated knowledge. Not that knowledge isn't crucial, but that attachment to knowledge becomes a hindrance to wisdom. Now, as our time together draws to a close, let me share one final truth about unlearning. Perhaps the most important of all, the deepest unlearning, is not about knowledge or identity or even beliefs. It's about unlearning separation itself. You've been learning your entire life to see yourself as separate from others, separate from others, separate from nature, separate from the unity of life. This learned separation is the cause of your suffering and limitation. It's what makes you cling to old knowledge, hold on to familiar identities, fear the emptiness that precedes transformation. When you begin to unlearn this fundamental separation, everything changes. I experienced it most profoundly in moments of complete presence in combat. When fighting an opponent with utter attention, something strange would occur. The boundary between us would dissolve. I wasn't responding to his movement. There was simply movement taking place in a common field of awareness. This wasn't mystic philosophy. This was direct perception of reality, unencumbered by the learned illusion of separation. And in those moments, there were no techniques, no methods, no styles. There was only right response spontaneously appearing out of complete presence. This is the final import of be like water. Be like water. Not a metaphor, but an immediate experience of reality, undivided by the conceptual mind. This same presence is available to you in every moment, in every activity, in every relationship. But to achieve it, you must be prepared to unlearn the most fundamental assumption of all, that you are an independent, separate being rather than an expression of the undivided wholeness of life. This does not mean the disappearance of your uniqueness or functional identity. It means experiencing that identity as a temporary expression of something far greater and interconnected. As a wave maintains its form and yet is one with the ocean, you can be yourself and yet experience your inseparability from all of life. The practice is simple but profound. Become fully present to what is occurring in this instant, without naming, without categorizing, without separating yourself from the experience. If you are washing dishes, just wash dishes completely, mindfully, without regard for past or future. When you're talking, be fully there, listening without preparing your reply, talking without managing your impression. When you're faced with trouble, meet it head-on, not as one who is dealing with something separate, but as life facing itself in this way. This presence is not something you achieve. It's what remains when you unlearn distraction, categorization, and separation. I used to demonstrate this principle on a regular basis with martial arts, but it's applicable to every facet of the human condition. The artist who becomes one with their medium produces work of profound depth. The parent who is fully present with their child forms unbreakable bonds. The leader who listens without separation makes decisions of genuine wisdom. This has absolutely nothing to do with technique or skill. It is the quality of presence that you bring to the moment, and that is based purely on your willingness to unlearn the conditioning of separation that perpetuates the illusion. My friend, we've come a long way together. From questioning your assumptions to destabilizing your identity, from embracing emptiness to engaging in specific practices, from disappointing others to unlearning separation itself. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It requires courage, commitment, and constant practice. Commit and constant practice. There will be moments of disorientation, moments of apparent backward drift, moments when you long for the safety of old certainties. This is natural. Unlearning doesn't proceed in a linear fashion. It spirals in loops of release and integration, emptiness and emergence. Trust this process. The temporary discomfort of not knowing is much preferable to the permanent limitation of false certainty. Remember that unlearning is not a question of arriving somewhere else. It is a question of freeing yourself from the illusion that you are somewhere to begin with. It is a question of realizing that you are not a finished being going about living, but life itself in constant process of dissolving and creating. Yourself, your own sense of identity. These are not property to defend, but fleeting articulations to hold lightly, to employ when serviceable, to release when restrictive. This flexibility is not frailty, it is ultimate strength. Like water, which flows into any shape without changing its intrinsic nature, you may respond to life's infinite variability without sacrificing your deepest integrity. As I stand to leave you, I am reminded of something I used to say to my closest students. Knowledge will bring you power, but character, respect. The unlearning that I have outlined today is not a matter of relinquishing knowledge. It is a matter of gaining the character to possess knowledge appropriately as tool and not identity, as question and not answer, as doorway and not destination. Such character does not accrue from the addition of information or the mastery of technique. It comes from the bravery to doubt everything, the humility to begin again, the patience to dwell in not knowing, and the faith to trust what emerges out of emptiness. My final invitation is straightforward. Begin. Don't wait for full comprehension or ideal circumstances. Start where you are, with one assumption questioned, one identity released, one instant of genuine emptiness embraced, unbraced. The unlearning process occurs one step at a time, and each step releases the possibility for the next. Trust that as you release what you think you know, what you really need to know will be drawn to you. Trust that as you let go of who you think you are, who you're supposed to become will be made known. Trust that as you empty your cup of stagnant certainties, life itself will fill it with fresh wisdom. This is the path of continual growth, continual discovery, continual liberation. This is what it means to truly unlearn what you have learned. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend.